Hello everybody and welcome to the Whiskey Dictionary. It seems that lately I have a penchant for going to the islands surrounding the main body of Scotland, so I figured I'd keep it up and keep going to the Isle of Jura. Now this is Jura 10, an Oloroso finished Scotch whiskey aged for 10 years. Let's get into it. On the southeast side of the Isle of Jura lies the Jura Distillery. Now this is only a couple of kilometers away from their main water source, which is called the Market Loch, and via a series of waterfalls and streams, they get their water brought right to them. Now, here's the interesting thing. On the tin, it says specifically that they get their water from the highest peak on the island. Now, technically, they're not wrong, right? All water flows downhill, and the tallest mountain on the island is quite far away from them. But, you know, a series of rivers and blah, blah, blah. Yes, they get their water from the tallest mountain on Jura. Marketing. So, let's go ahead and just talk a little bit about this distillery, right? So, the island itself is home to about 200 people, and a lot of them work at or for or in the whiskey market. And, you know, some of them do tourism, some of them actually work in the distillery, others just run the single shop that they have on the island. There's one road, one shop, one pub, and one distillery. I thought that was kind of neat. But let's talk history again, and I'm going to bring this little canister back up because I want to talk about this. So, this says established in 1810. Now, maybe. Established in 1810 means that it was somehow the Jura Distillery was founded, and yes, that is entirely correct. In fact, this guy, he's the Archibald Campbell. He was a big landowner in Jura, and he decided to start a distillery back in 1810. So, not infactual, unfactual, not without factuals. So, anyway, he started a distillery, and it ran for a number of years. And then around 1884 or so, it closed down. And then around 1900, it started back up again. And then around the 1940s or so, it shut back down. But 1955 came around, and a couple of people decided that they wanted to revitalize the economy of Jura by starting this distillery. So, for a number of years, they built it up, they got everything ready to go, they aged some stuff, and in 1963, they started the Jura Distillery that you're seeing here. And if you look back, you can find some old bottles. They all basically look the same. And that's kind of a cool thing, and something I wanted to talk about. But I did want to kind of elaborate a little bit on the history, just to prove that point I made last week about Scotch distilleries feeling that they need to sound as old as humanly possible, as much as they can justify. And it's just not necessary, guys. Stop doing it. It's just not truthful, right? Anyway, let's talk bottle. This bottle is very cool, and you can see historically they've always had this shape. Now, the shape is designed to withstand crazy waters. Basically, the sea outside of Jura and in that general area of the British Isles is insane. In fact, they have the third largest whirlpool really close to where Jura is, the Corrie Vrecken. Yes, that Corrie Vrecken from Ardbeg. So, this bottle is designed to be able to be shipped without basically whacking into other bottles and breaking. And the way that they do this, I tried to figure this out myself. Now, I'm a pretty smart guy, but I'm not like a strength of materials guy, right? So if anybody here in the comments knows why this would make the best shaped bottle, let me know. But my theory is that arcs are strong. Maybe this is thicker glass. Who knows? Something about the way that this bottle is shaped makes it so that if it's clanging around, it's not going to break. So, let me know in the comments if you happen to know the exact answer, because I would be personally interested in you guys teaching me something. All right, let's go ahead and talk whiskeys out of Jura. So Jura has a typical, you know, signature, they call it the signature series, right? And it's very standard. It's a bunch of age statements with some no age statements in there. Now, in this case, it's Jura Journey is the no age statement. And then you have the Jura 10, the Jura 12, the Jura 7 wood. Now, this is a no age statement, but it does sound really interesting. I'm going to take a little tangent sideline here to tell you about it. So it is ex-American oak, or, you know, it's aged in ex-bourbon barrels, essentially. But then it gets parted out. Each barrel is parted out into 6 different groups, and those groups get aged in one of 6 different French oak barrels. Now, I like French oak. I find that it gives a wonderful flavor to Scotch. So I'm excited personally to go try to find this Jura 7 wood and try it out. So I'm probably going to do so. And maybe I'll do it this year. I don't know. We'll see. I'm going to check out the price. I have no idea what the price is. Maybe I'll put it up here while I'm talking here. Hopefully it's not too much because it would be a bit of a gamble, but we'll see. Either way. After the Jura 7 wood, you have the 18 year and the 21 year. Now, something else to know is that the 21 year is only just a little hair under $200. So their top of the line whiskey is under $200. And for Scotch, that is a bit atypical, I feel. I think that most Scotches, or a lot of Scotches, have their higher tier stuff pretty expensive. Now, it's not atypical for a 21-year-old to be about that price, but it's interesting. Either way, I think you kind of get where I'm going here. The 21-year-old would be affordable if you wanted to try it. It's just hard to get. It's hard to find. So, anyway, let's talk about this guy. So the Jura 10 is aged in ex-bourbon barrels and then finished in Oloroso sherry. Not much to it, but it's, reminiscent of what a lot of different distilleries across all of Scotland are doing with their 10-year-olds. Or 12-year-olds, maybe somewhere low age statements. All right. Now, it's worth noting that Jura changed their flavor profile a few years ago, back in 2018. So if you haven't had Jura in a number of years, you should give it a shot because, well, actually, we'll get to that in the overview. But you should know that it may taste different than what you remember. So let's go ahead and get into the nosing and the tasting. But before we do, I am going to teach you guys a little trick. Now, this is something that I probably will remark on a few times in videos, so if you are somebody who watches all of my videos, you'll hear this a few times. But I think it's worth noting, and it's worth putting out into the universe so people can think to do it. It's not rocket science, but it is important. This here is an empty whiskey glass. So this is an empty whiskey glass. Used to have whiskey in it. Earlier in the day, I tried some of this Jura because I wanted to recall. I wanted to remind myself of some of the flavor profile and the nosing and all of this stuff. And then I left the mostly empty glass. If I were to tip this over, you would see that there's a little bit of whiskey. Actually, yeah, you could totally see that moving on the screen. There's a little tiny bit of whiskey there. Why is that important? Well, that's important because if you smell this like a half hour later, it's gonna really help you to get the nosing notes out of a whiskey. If you pour this into there, even at 40%, there's a lot of vapors going on. There's different alcohol vapors, but there's everything else kind of just steaming out of this. I'm going to use the word steaming out of the glass. And that can influence the way that you nose. Certain things are going to be strong. Certain things are going to be timid. Certain things are going to be not evolved yet. And so if you nose this a half hour after you're finished drinking your dram, you may pick up some new things. It's a technique that I've used for at least a couple of years at this point, and oftentimes in my notes, I'll notice that the things that are at the very end of my notes are what I'll get after the dram is gone. So, something to know, good tip. Hopefully that's something that will suit you well. Let's go ahead and pour this. So, hopefully you guys are all having a great week. It's Friday. It's a good day. Last week we had, a holiday here in the United States, so a lot of us had Monday off, so hopefully it was a short week for you. But for me, it was, and this is a great way to kind of finish off my week. So, cheers. Now, here's something interesting. And full disclosure, this is actually the second time I'm filming this episode because my microphone was gone, so I don't recall if I said this earlier in the episode or not, but it was something I wanted to put out there. This smells a very lot like Highland Park 12. So that's something interesting because Highland Park 12 is an island, off the coast of Scotland, but it's also aged in sherry or finished in sherry. So it's very similar concept to Jura. So interesting. It has a lot of the same characteristics. But let's go ahead and actually give this a nose. So the sherry influence is working its way into this whiskey. You can get things like orange. You get things like honey, just a little bit of honey. But there's also peat in here, which makes sense because peat is prevalent on the island. So aside from that, you're getting some shoe leather, which typically will come from the ex-bourbon barrel. Just in general, oak can manifest itself as shoe leather occasionally. Let's see what else. I would say small, salty, briny air. Just kind of a general saltiness to it. But most of these are very muted. The only thing you might pick up immediately is the idea that there is sherry involved and maybe some of that orange and honey. Otherwise, the rest of it you might have to search for. So, go ahead and search for it. Let's go ahead and have a taste. Cheers. All right, here's the deal. Yeah, that. I'll be honest, this is dull. It's not bad. Actually, it's far from bad. It's approachable. It's easy, but it's dull. It doesn't do anything spectacular. It doesn't have any significant note that really stands out to me as something that you have to try. This is mostly losing that sherry finish to me. Like, it's there. I can tell. You would put this in front of me, I would have a sip, and I would say that has sherry influence. But none of the nuances that impart flavor specificity into this whiskey are there. It's just losing that sherried influence. So what are you getting out of this? Well, let's have another sip and see. Now, here's an interesting thing. It's viscous for 40%. Usually 40% feels thin. This does not. It's got some good body to it. That's a plus. It does taste a little bit like oak. It's got some good influence from that ex-bourbon barrel. Second taste here, maybe a little bit more of the sherry influence, but again, nothing specific is standing out. The smoke is standing out. The salt air is standing out a little bit. If I had to put my finger on anything, it would probably be the honey, but mostly it's a well-balanced whiskey, but it's not layered and it's not nuanced. So it's not bad. Like I said, now I hopefully you kind of understand more what I'm talking about. None of this is bad. It's just uninteresting. So here's the deal. I asked you guys what you thought. Well, let me give my opinion first. I would give this a rating of try it. I think that this is one worth trying at a bar, if you can. If you can't, then maybe skip it or try it at a friend's house. But ultimately, I don't think that you should go out of your way to have this unless you have the opportunity to buy it and try it out. And even after the fact, you're going to be like, okay, that was a good starter. Let me try something else that I really want to try. And unfortunately, I feel like that's what Jura is going to be at this 10-year-old. Now, I have not tried the higher aged versions. I'm eager to. Obviously, that 7-wood I kind of said sounded really interesting, but I would like to try, say, like an 18-year-old of this at higher ABV. That's the biggest problem here. 40% to me is killing this whiskey. 43% would probably be all that they would need to give it a lot more character. So anyway, try it from me. But what do you guys think? So I asked in a YouTube poll earlier this week what you all thought. And your ratings were interesting, actually. So out of 480 votes, 2% of you said to stock it. So you like it all the time. 6% of you said to buy it, 18% said try it, 20% said to ignore it, and 54% of people had never tried it, which means that a quarter of you felt like this was worth people's time and energy to try. And realistically, half of you who have had this before thought it was worth having. So that's actually a pretty significant amount, and something that you might want to take into account yourself. Now, let me know in the comments below, especially whether you voted in that poll or not. Let me know in the comments below what you would rate this. Would you give this a stock it? Would you give it a buy it, a try it, or an ignore it? And I'd be very interested to see. Again, if anybody knows what's up with the curves on the bottle and how that helps it to be shipped, I'd love to learn. I hope it's something obvious. I kind of want to look dumb, I guess is silly, because when I look at this, I'm just like, why would that matter? But, I mean, it kind of looks like a ship in a bottle. Anyway, that does it for this episode of the Whiskey Dictionary. But first, let me thank all of these people here. These are all my patrons. They're people who support the channel month to month, and they receive a lot in return, honestly. They get a Patreon-only challenge coin. They get a bunch of new content, additional content. They get first tastes. Like earlier, actually, before doing this, I reviewed the Jesse James American Outlaw Bourbon for them as a first taste. So that was not very good, but it was also kind of a fun episode to do. I also do a weekly video where I tell everybody what's going on that week and kind of give any sort of channel updates. There's a lot of stuff that I do for the Patreon that not a lot of other whiskey tubers do. So if it's something that you're interested or capable of supporting, buying whiskey is expensive. And I depend a lot on patrons to support the channel. So consider it. If it's something that you can do, even at the $3 tier or $5 tier, you're going to be getting something in return, and it will help me out immensely. So thank you everybody for joining me here on the Whiskey Dictionary. I hope you have an awesome rest of your day, and cheers.